Dr. Dana Tassone here with individuals participating in the HFT6296 course, the capstone course for the Master of Science program, discussing Chapter 2 lecture notes. As so far, what we've done is we have established the expectations for the course, then we established more expectations for the course, and we welcomed you to the course. And we talked about Chapter 1, which is always an overview of each component. And now what we'll do from Chapter 2 on is we'll talk about each segment of the strategic planning / strategic audit process. And as you recall, strategic planning begins with an external scan, an internal audit. You compare the evidence from those two factors to the mission for the organization. And the question you ask there, does it make sense to still be in this business? The answer is yes. You proceed to take your best guess about the future, which is called the forecast. And from the forecast, you develop future long-term objectives and short-term objectives. Long-term objectives require strategies or action study. You know that objectives are targets for performance. Long-term objectives require strategies, action steps, to accomplish the objectives over a period of 3 to 5 years. Short-term objectives develop tactics, which are action steps used to develop, used to establish those objectives over the next 1 year or less. And from those two, you then generate policies, standards, and procedures. And the next step you do is evaluate your progress. And so often when we used to write strategic plans in the corporate world, people would spend a few months writing this plan, a month, 2 or 3, and they would get the plan completed, and it would be in a big binder, and the steps would be logically laid out, and then they would throw the binder in their desks, and at the end of the year they would look at it and say, I wonder if we made it. Now, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to find out where you are on a continuous basis. You have to look at your plan at least once a month to find out if you're making it. When I used to, with my office staff, I used to set up a board, and we had our goals, our objectives, and for a period of a year or 3 years, and we would check every month to see our progress. And if we weren't making an objective, we just slide. I had cards, and I would just slide the card forward to the next month and to the next month. So it's a process that it requires a visitation pretty much on a daily basis, but at least a monthly basis. So when we look at the external environment, the two main categories, if you will, would be a broad category called the societal environment, and a narrower and more simple logically version of the task environment. The societal environment consists of general forces, while the task environment consists of specific elements. The task environment is real easy to identify because those are things that are directly impacting a firm, your firm, but the societal environment is more nebulous because it's a little harder to identify those factors out there until you give it a lot of thought. Here's where it's important to take a look at the sample papers, I think I gave you two, and to look at the outline for the strategic audit, and maybe even do a little Google search on societal environment forces. I say a Google search because an academic search won't give you what you're looking for, because academic searches will give you theoretical stuff, pseudo-empirical things, and they're great stuff, but that's not what you need. A practitioner needs a different perspective. So in the societal environment, the general categories, and these all have subheadings, the general categories are economic forces, socio-cultural forces, and technological forces, and political legal forces. So you're basically talking about two areas in the outside environment, those being legal areas, political areas, and social areas, psychological areas, sociology type areas, and And those are the things that really require some serious examination to even find out what they are. And what you're doing in this process, whether it be the societal environment or the task environment, is you're monitoring what's going on out there. You're evaluating what's going on out there relative to your organization, and you disseminate the information to key people within the firm. When you have a strategic plan, it's an arduous task, and it's best done by groups of people, and it's even better done by sharing that stuff with everybody in the organization. And you work real hard on it for a month, 2 months, or 3 months, and you put it in this real fancy binder, and then everybody throws it in their desk, and a year later they pull it out and dust it off and say, I wonder if we made it. And that's not the purpose of the plan. The purpose of the plan is to effectively monitor and evaluate how you're doing in the scheme of things. The strategic plan for my areas of responsibility, we would have a board up there. It would be very visible. Visuals are very good in management. People like visuals. And we'd have a board, and would have objectives, and would have strategies, and would have responsibilities. Who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for that? And we'd get together and look at the board every month. It was laid out in 12 months for the next year. And, we'd look at it, and there's no penalty if you're not making your target. It was done on cards. We would just slide the index card to the next month until we eventually accomplished the plan. And when we accomplished each goal, or each objective, each strategy, we would just we would color code the cards, and they'd go into a pile. And at the end of the year, guess what? When I talked to my senior level managers that I had, and it was time to do their performance appraisal, we would play cards. Here's your pile of good cards, and here's your pile of not so good cards. Here's where you made it, and here's where you missed. And it makes for a very concise performance evaluation. So, what you do in this process, in your strategic audit, basically what you're doing is you're identifying strategic issues, and you're prioritizing strategic issues, and you're categorizing them. And in the strategic planning process, the same is true. There are all kinds of scientific methods, pseudo-scientific methods, I should say, that have to do with prioritization of issues. And there are matrices that are out there. There are statistical methods that are out there, and you don't really need to go into any of those factors at this point. You may never. I knew of all these tools. I never used them in my entire corporate life. Basically, you would brainstorm, and which is also a method of forecasting, and prioritizing. And the old story: none of us is smarter than all of us. And from those sessions, those non-judgmental sessions, we would come up with prioritization. So, and of course, one of the big, or probably the number one issue that everybody talks about in the task environment is competition. And with competition, it's more than who's your current competitors. It's the threat of new entrants, and the bargaining power of buyers, and the bargaining power of suppliers. There's a thing out there called the supply chain, and you don't see it when you're working, but in the supply chain, it starts with a source of a product that you need to use in order to provide your product. And we, in our industry, are the end of the supply chain. So a product, let's say it's produce. Let's say it's the produce you would use in a restaurant or food and beverage outlet. If produce starts where? It starts on the farm. So it starts with agribusiness. Agribusiness then moves their product into a brokerage. The brokerage then brokers the product to a wholesale distributor. The wholesale distributor then distributes that product, chops it up, and distributes it to a retail distributor, which is not retail in the sense of giving it to customers. retail distributor in the sense of that's who we buy from. We are buying from a retail distributor. And then we, as purchasers, will use a number of different vendors and purchase our products at the best price, highest quality. And I give you examples of that stuff, how it all works. And another concept that I mentioned in this chapter is the concept of integration. If you're a firm and you choose to integrate your business, which gives you economies of scale and economies of scope, you choose to integrate your business, you can integrate your business, it's all horizontal, you can integrate your business either backwards or forwards. In our industry, a great example of this, by the way, is Starbucks. Starbucks is the master of backward integration. They actually own most coffee beans that they use. So they're in the agribusiness, they're in the brokerage business, they're in the distribution business, they're in the retail distribution business to themselves, and then provide the product to their customers. Forward integration is when an organization actually moves horizontally ahead of where it is. An example of that would be the Hilton organization, and as well as Marriott and a lot of biggies. But Hilton used to be known as a certain brand of hotels that was in the U.S. and in international locations. Well, that's not true for Hilton these days. What has happened is Hilton has expanded their portfolio to include every classification from limited service all the way up to luxury. So, you know, you are able to enhance your power, and power in business means money. You are able to enhance your power by either backward or forward integration. Now, in the task environment, so in the societal environment, I list the basic main categories of the societal environment, and they basically fall into two categories. They fall into government regulation and legalization. And then from there, there's all kinds of subcategories. In task environment, it's all about stakeholders. Stakeholders, I told you before, I gave you a simplified model of 4 basic stakeholder groups: shareholders, customers, employees, and the local community in which you do business. That's a simplified model. And the only internal factor there is employees. They're the only people you have control over, at least you think you do. And the other 3 elements you have no control over. And so when you take a look at stakeholders, you're looking at government, you're looking at unions, you're looking at communities, creditors, trade associations, trade groups, stockholders, all of those things. In a private firm, it's easy to believe that a shareholder is part of the firm, but he or she is not. They are not. They're outside the firm. They don't work in your firm. They don't buy your product. They invest in your firm for financial gain. Therefore, they're outsiders. That's in the external environment. I gave you some information about forecasting. I talked about matrices. I talked about statistical modeling, Delphi technique, those types of scenarios. You really don't have to be familiar with the statistics involved in it. Why? Because I'm not asking you to create a logical strategic plan. I'm asking you to generate an analysis of an existing plan or an existing practice, and that's the strategic audit. So there's no need for you to forecast the future, but it's good to know that these are the techniques you would use. In my career, my corporate career, I never used any of the statistical stuff. The only process I used was brainstorming. And it's the old story. None of us is smarter than all of us. And so you sit there with a number of everybody's important within the organization, but knowledgeable people, and you generate these ideas that lead you to prioritize the factors that are impacting you, and to generate a forecast of the future. So that's chapter 2 in a nutshell, and I'll see you in the clip on the next